AIC commissioned Dr. Marcus Bellet-Travers of Anglia Ruskin University to produce an independent report that considers the many complex issues faced and the opportunities for food production in the UK. The key finding of this report is the need for an independent food security committee, a committee which can ensure that people of this country are kept safe with food availability maintained, and the wider global context that that means. In a moment, our Head of Policy and External Affairs, Ed Barker, who's been the driving force behind this commission, will present more details and outline this core conclusion, which we feel is so relevant to where we find ourselves. I've been reassured to see that others in the industry have also recently touched on the pressing need for a much wider collaborative effort on food security, and would ask all policymakers to look closely at our report. On that note, it's my great pleasure to introduce the AIC's Head of Policy and External Affairs, Ed Barker. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, everyone. I'll just say a few quick words about our report. Here it is, Powering Up Productivity for Sustainable Food Security. Don't worry, other copies will be available. You don't have to fight over this one. And this was to mark the AIC's 20th anniversary. Instead of a reflection, we felt we wanted to look forwards at the next 20 years of UK agriculture. Although we're a UK-based association, Peterborough has been our home for the last 20 years, and it felt very appropriate to commission Anglia Ruskin University, a local academic institution, to partner with. We were really impressed with their new campus in Peterborough, and their recent merger with Writtle College underlines their credentials to both research and practice of agriculture in the United Kingdom. It was important that it was a totally independent report, separate from the AIC, providing critical challenge from the outside, which is what it does. As Robert has outlined, we have the backdrop of a very volatile world. Climate change, COVID, Ukraine, regulatory interventions mean that we need to understand our yield gap. What are we in the UK not producing that we could be sustainably? We know that agricultural businesses need medium to long-term certainty and a clear capacity to invest. There is a global race for developing the sustainable food solutions of tomorrow. We can't sit still, and it's easy to be left behind if businesses are not confident in the UK as a serious producer of food. We cannot overlook as well that we have changing populations, diets, trade balances, and how these can combine to amplify the impacts of global trade volatility. The Powering Productivity report poses where can we make the productivity gains having established the yield gaps. It shows that there is no single method and that productivity in the landscape is very complicated indeed. How many times recently have you come across reports or announcements that have claimed that there is a silver single bullet to answer UK farming productivity? It's a trap that many, I think, fall into. In the last year, I've read reports that have focused on a number of single issues, very important, but there are potential beneficial impact to UK agriculture. Feed additives, advice, labour, genetics, pulses, artificial intelligence, dietary change, automation, and broader, less defined concepts like regenerative agriculture, nature-based solutions, quality over quantity, all in reports I've read over the last year, but all focusing on the single issue. This report reflects and recognises all of those, stressing that productivity is multifaceted and complex, with many different variables that have a different impact in different parts of the UK farming sector. Many are interdependent, and we need to recognise that. Attracting staff cannot be achieved if there are insufficient training or educational pathways. Improving diversity of crops cannot be achieved if there are no markets for them, or if the chemistry or the seed is simply not available. Improving livestock health and lowering emissions can't be achieved if we don't have a planning system to help accommodate new infrastructure and buildings, for example. We can't export goods if we have barriers to trade which are erected with our most important markets. So this is embracing the complexity of productivity and appreciates the number of moving parts, big and small, that are required. That's why we used our engine analogy. Hopefully that'll work. Right. This report not only approaches our yield gap, but it then takes a step further by asking, so what? Understanding our theoretical yield gap means nothing if it's not acted upon. It's become clear that UK businesses, farmers and land managers need that long-term clarity. Short-term, reactive, unpredictable decision-making is not only bad for our businesses, but it challenges our food security. As of this week, we are now on our 8th Secretary of State in DEFRA in 9 years. In that time, USA, Germany, Canada are on their 3rd. It clearly is a huge challenge, and I know, and I pay tribute to the DEFRA civil servants in the room who are no doubt having to manage that approach for the last decade. But this goes beyond just political continuity. The incapacity to plan, build, and invest affects our food security at a time we need it more than ever. As Robert mentioned, the report calls, therefore, for an independent UK Food Security Committee. Similar to the Climate Change Committee, we need a cross-government, cross-industry, cross-UK forum to plan for the future of our food supply. As the report finds, agricultural production and the balance of trade is a cross-policy issue. For too long, DEFRA has been expected to carry a role that should be a priority for all of government. That is why it needs not only DEFRA, but transport, education, trade, business, climate change, the entire union of the UK, and of course the Treasury, to be an active part of the long-term planning process. Independence is key, and that's why it needs to be taken outside of the scope of short-term political priorities. In many ways, our political system is poorly designed for such long-term planning. Instead, we need independent advocates without short-term political pressures to plan for our production of food in the long term. And this appears to be in the zeitgeist. This concept is one that's been alluded to by other organisations and parliamentarians. I think it goes to show there is a genuine interest across relevant agricultural and business stakeholders to work together in the long term. The challenge is therefore laid now to political parties and UK administrations if they can do the same thing. We hope the report at least stimulates that thinking and a combination of academic research into our yield gaps, but also a thought leadership piece as to how to practically plan for the long term. I would really pose to anyone here how we can embrace the complexity of production and not fall into oversimplification. To conclude, land is a finite resource, as are the increasing pressures upon it. We have to get away from food security as a short-term political combative issue. The report was commissioned to mark the 20th anniversary of the AIC, and in doing it, ARU, AIC, and our member businesses are firmly thinking about the next 20. The copies of the report will be available in the coffee break, so please do pick one up. And with that, I thank you very much.